hired with.
Morning, Mark.
They basically told me to go and fly a kite.
Gerald?
I can't hear you, but when you want to make a motion, speak up so I don't forget you.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, hear you now.
Are you shocked by that?
1 minute, you guys.
This,
I'm just teasing.
I am, because I mean, you're either transparent or you're not. Period. And I think I had every right to ask, and it just seemed that the request was inappropriate. And I don't know why.
It's 10 o'clock. We have a quorum. Called Electoral Area Committee meeting of Wednesday, July 10th to order. Chair acknowledges we're located on the traditional territory of the Latchpatch people. First item of business will be the adoption of the public agenda.
Chair, I would like to propose an item of new business called Wild Safe BC.
Alrighty.
Sorry, what's the name?
Say that again?
Wild Safe BC.
Wild Safe.
Safe
Safe.
BC. And I would like to move adoption of the agenda as amended.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of the adoption? Yes?
Mr. Chairman, there's been a request to move item number 4.
Oh, you're right. So we'll vary the agenda and move item number 4 to the last item on the agenda. So do you want to move as adopted, please? Robin? Move the
Move
agenda
it-
as adopted.
Oh, yeah, move as adopted. Is that what you said I needed to say?
Yeah, move adoption agenda.
As amended,
as amended.
twice.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. And all those in favor? That's carried. No petitions, delegations, adoption of previous meeting minutes for June 12, 2024.
So moved.
Can we have a seconder first?
Oh,
Second.
but I would prefer to have, I have a concern with one of the items.
What do you want to do?
I have a concern with one of the items in the minutes.
Okay, well, let's move it first.
Oh, okay.
And then before we vote on it.
Then we discuss it. Got it.
All right, so you moved it and John seconded it. All righty, and your comments, please.
Thank you. One of the items in the minutes is regarding the Outer Islands solid waste item, which had been deferred and is listed as an addendum item. The motion I made at that meeting was a 3-part motion, and I previously discussed this with the corporate services officer, and it was amended to include the third part of the motion when it came to the June 26th board meeting. So I was just hoping that the third part of that motion, which is that a solid waste dumpster at Hoskin Landing be explored by use by Outer Discovery Islanders with the cost being shared by resident participants. I was hoping that could be added to these minutes because it was added to the minutes which were adopted by the board, I think. Is that correct,
Mr.
Tom?
Yates?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we are aware that, that the minutes should have that third part in it, and if they don't now, we can make that amendment if that's the wish of the committee.
Thank you. All right, on receipt of the minutes.
I would like to move receipt as amended.
Second.
All those in favor? That is carried. Any business arising? Director Mawini?
Thank you, Chair. The item, business arising from the minutes is bylaw number 564, the Electoral Area C short-term rental amendments. So it's kind of a question because Bill 35, which is the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, requires our zoning bylaws to define and regulate short-term rentals. And this is why we received a zoning bylaw amendment report for the 3 electoral areas which have zoning bylaws. So my question is about the Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw and if it should or could also be updated to reflect the directive of Bill 35.
Mr. Leach, do you have any comment on that? Okay.
Thank you through the chair to the director. At the wish of the director, we could bring back bylaw amendment considerations for the committee to include short-term rental definitions and contemplate whether or not we would permit those or where we would permit those within the bylaw. At this time, we have not done any outreach specifically to the outer islands that would give us a benchmark to provide recommendations to the committee. So if it is the will of the director, my recommendation would be that perhaps we try to do a short-term rental survey or something of that nature specifically for the outer islands and share that with the community associations prior to bringing back recommendations to the committee. Do note, though, that this is not a requirement of the most recent legislation to have to update the rural land use bylaw at this time, but certainly that could be done with direction of the board.
Okay.
May I have a follow-up?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess my question is that I have specifically been asked about short-term rentals and if they are currently allowed within the Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw, and I wasn't able to answer, so I'm curious if the planning staff would consider that they are currently permitted as a use?
Thank you through the chair. At this time, I would have to do a little bit of research to determine what the definitions currently are within the bylaw and whether or not they would be contemplated. I would say at this point, likely they would be deemed as not permitted because they aren't defined and they are a commercial use. So where commercial uses are permitted in the rural land use bylaw, short-term rentals would likely be permitted, but elsewhere likely not. But again, because each of our bylaws are worded so much, so differently, I would have to look in more detail and bring something back to the committee.
Anything further?
Yeah, well, should I make a motion about that now, or is that a different time? I'm not really sure how that works.
I would prefer a motion on that, yeah, if you could.
Okay, yeah.
Go ahead.
And is it appropriate to do that now,
Yes.
under business arising?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think that Annika was recommending that we start with outreach to the community or a survey, is that correct? So should I put that in my motion?
I think just a motion on a report, like Annika said, they need to do some research on the permittedness, if that's a word, of short-term rentals there. And depending on what the outcome, we can include options in that for community outreach. So I just think a motion for a report on short-term rentals on the rural outer islands, something like that would be fine.
Okay, great, thank you. So I would move that a report be prepared outlining the short-term rentals permissiveness and options for changes and community outreach. Do I need to put that part in there?
Sure, that's fine. We get the intent.
I missed what you said, Gerald.
I said brief is better.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Director Vanish. Any comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Public considerations, none. No notice of motions. No chairs report today. Staff reports, Cortez Island Wildfire Brigade for receipt.
Move receipt. Oh, I'll second it.
I think Sean will speak to this.
Through the chair to the committee, currently under function 250 Cortez Fire Protection, the regional district contracts with the Cortez Island Firefighting Association, registered society under the Societies Act, to provide fire protection in line with the exterior playbook standards, war fire protection, ambulance assist to a portion of Cortez Island. We have received correspondence from the CIFA that they wish to also implement a wildfire brigade service under the contract, and the two options in front of you are we consider this and engage further with the CIFA to define what that standard of service would be and bring that back, or no interest at all.
Any comments? Director Vanesh?
Thank you, Chair. Given that the fire department's only able to technically service the service area outlined in their contract, and the growing threat of wildfires in our region and certainly on Cortez being so remote, I'll be moving option A. Thank you.
Anything further? Seeing none on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. The motion, Director Vanesh?
I'll move that the committee recommend that the regional district work with CIFA to obtain additional details, such as better defining the scope of the proposed service and report back to the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? All those in favor? That is carried. Number 2, Cortez Island open burning restrictions for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Tom will speak to this, but before he does, when I was driving into work this morning, I heard on the news that there's a provincial campfire ban blanket across the province, I think starting,
At 12.
there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this has obviously been in front of the committee several times. The last time it was in front of the committee, we were requested as staff to look into some changes, which we've done. And we're recommending, I believe, acceptance of one change that's being proposed and recommending that the other changes proposed not be accepted for the reasons outlined in the report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anything further on the receipt? Director Vanesh?
Yeah, I can ask after receipt.
That's still on receipt. He should ask that. He should ask now. We're on receipt.
Okay, I can ask now, sure.
We're on receipt. Yeah.
I appreciate all the staff work into this bylaw. Given that we're in a fire ban right now, I'm not in a huge rush to pass this today if we can't get it right. The big challenge for me, which I brought up last time, was the inspection of property and authority to extinguish a fire. And I think it's really important to create bylaws that when people read them, they make sense. And we all know that someone from Campbell River is not going to come to Cortez to investigate or extinguish an open fire on Cortez. And although, so the bylaw just doesn't make sense, those two terms, number 5 and 6. And my understanding is that the Cortez Fire Department already has the authority to enter people's property if there's a public safety issue. If there's a fire ban on and someone has a fire, that is a public safety issue. It's a danger to neighboring properties and a danger to the public, and they already have the authority to enter people's property. So I think it's been clear that the regional district does not have the authority to give that, but my argument here is that they don't need to give that authority because they already have it. So the fire department already has the authority to extinguish an open fire when there's a fire ban because it's a public safety issue. They already have the authority to enter someone's property if there's a fire there because it's a public safety issue. So number 5 and 6 are just not necessary in this bylaw, both from practicality point of view and just like a common sense point of view when we read it, because we know no one from Campbell River is going to come and put out a fire.
So do you want to, or are you going to make, after receipt, a motion to delete those two? Because I
would.
Yeah.
Anything further? On receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. The motion then, Director Vanesh?
I would move that we remove number 5 and 6 from the bylaw, and hang on. That we remove number 5 and 6 from the bylaw, and that the committee recommend that those amended changes are brought back to the board for approval.
Do you mean?
Would we, as electoral areas, all be liable for that or not?
Mr. Chairman, the way the local government reads is that the participants in a service are liable for actions brought against the regional district in court. So if there was liability to be attached, I'm assuming that would be electoral area B, that would be the cause of that. But, you know, it's so hard to think about all the circumstances that could arise that could lead to such an action being taken. But generally speaking, I would say it's not the electoral areas per se. It would either be the full board or the electoral area B that would likely be found in violation or liable for damages if there were any.
Thank you. Did you second that motion, Director Mawhinney? I can't remember.
I have no second.
There is no
Could.
seconder yet.
I will second it right now.
All right, it's on the floor. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? You have a comment?
Could we have a clarification on the motion? Was it coming back to EASC or was it going straight to the board? 'Cause-
EASC.
Okay, great, thank you.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, and Director Rice is opposed. I should have called for that, all opposed. You want to stick your hand up, but you're opposed. Okay, so that'll carry. Number 3, Quadra Island zoning bylaw revisions for receipt.
Move receipt?
Second.
Tom, you wanted to speak to this or no?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So basically, what the committee is seeing is a situation where we have two bylaws introducing very, very similar zoning designations for the Quadra Island zoning bylaw. Obviously, it's an error, and so we're proposing two different ways to fix it. One would be to go through an amendment process to fix the error. The other would be to simply use a revision process. The only difference really is that using the revision process would not require us going through public hearing as part of it. So really, it's up to the committee. I think if they feel that there's advantage of going one way or the other, we're quite happy as staff to follow that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. Any further comments? Director Mawhinney?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions that I was hoping staff can provide some further details on it. The report talks about that there are two different zones, both called Commercial 2E, which were created 2 years apart, the most recent one being created 6 years ago in 2018. So my first question is just curious, like, how did it come to light now? But then I noticed in the bylaw that the main difference between the two is the minimum lot size and the side yard setback. So are there other differences? And what is the revision being proposed? Which side yard setback and minimum lot size would prevail?
Thank you, through the chair. I can't speak specifically to how this has finally come to light now, other than every time we amend a bylaw, the parent bylaw needs to be consolidated, and sometimes it takes some time to consolidate those bylaws. And sometimes the versions of the bylaws that are being used most readily are not the most up-to-date. So what happened in this instance was the C2E that was adopted in 2016 was missed when we created a new C zone in 2018. And so staff thought that the next zone that we were creating in 2018 was C2E when actually it was C2F. So nothing actually changes on the surface. Both of these bylaws will remain the same. They were created specifically for applications for specific parcels of land. So on the surface, this will not change anything. The uses that are permitted in each of those zones should relate specifically to each of those bylaws that were adopted in 2016 and 2018. The problem being when we reference C2E, you now look at the zoning bylaw and there's two. So in all fairness to the applicant, this was a staff error. I would call this more like a housekeeping amendment where we just need to be able to reference the most recent zoning bylaw that was adopted in 2018 as C2F, and then everything will be back to normal.
May I, Chair, ask a further question? Thank you. So there, as noted in the report, there are two rezoned properties, and you just mentioned that as well. So are there other properties within the catchment area of the zoning bylaw which are zoned one of these two C2E versions? And then really, how will the amendment or revision affect the properties which have already gone through the process of rezoning? Like, are we going to relabel the one that's what should have been C2F? We're going to now go in and tell them, actually, your property, we told you were C2E, but now you're C2F?
That's correct. So the C2E that was adopted in 2018 is specific to one parcel. So this will only affect the one parcel that was rezoned in 2018. Nothing on the land changes. Their permitted uses are still their permitted uses. Will be an internal update to our mapping. So it's a quick fix from a GIS perspective. And we will advise BC assessment. Again, that won't change anything because it's commercial to commercial. It doesn't make any differences with respect to assessment. And the only property owner that is affected is the 2018 property owner. And the only thing, again, that is going to change is they're just going to now say that they're zoned C2F instead of C2E.
So that, I just confirming that there won't be any additional costs to the property owner at all?
No, but there would be if we had to go through the first option, which would be public hearing.
On receipt, anything further? All those something further on receipt?
Nope.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Okay, a motion, please.
I would like to move option B, that the committee recommend that that's the way to not have any public hearing, right? Yeah, okay. I'd like to move option B, that the committee recommend that the regional district bring forward a revision bylaw to correct the error introduced by bylaw number 317.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? It's carried. We'll skip number 4 for now, and number 5, Kwathiaski Cove sewer rate increases for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think just as part of the financial plan and the resolution that was supported through that, there was a recommendation to amend the Kwathiaski Cove sewer budget with a rate increase of 2.5%. And that is what you have before you. And I think we're happy to answer any questions you have in regards to it.
Anything further?
Well, I do have a few questions now that you've
Go ahead.
asked. Thank you, Chair. So I have a couple questions about the sewer system really in sort of like a larger context, because it seems like a good way to ask questions when this is on the table for discussion. So the report highlights that the Kwathiaski Cove Community Sewer Service provides service for approximately 216 property owners. And, you know, it also talks about the cost of the upgrades that are required. So I'm just curious about the size of the system. In other contexts or locations with a similar system, how many homes would or could a system like this serve?
So I'll answer part of it, and Sheen and Wolf can answer some. It's really difficult to say what a similar system, how many homes it could accommodate, because you have some systems, there's a type of treatment involved. There's some systems that have capacity, discharge, disposal, and some technologies are expandable, some are not. So it's really challenging to say compare an apple to an apple, because they're all very different in terms of, discharge and disposal and technology. So, and age. So I don't think we can really answer that. They give you a satisfactory answer on that one. The size and the capacity system, I'm sure Sheen or Wolf already know what that is or what we have, so I'll leave that to them.
Well, maybe it's irrelevant if what you're saying is there's no other apples to compare it to.
Maybe not apples to compare it to, but I think it has, I know it has some kind of existing capacity. So if you want to know the size of it and the capacity of it, I think we have that.
Thank you, through the chair. So we did update and review the capacity of our system. I believe it was in 2023, and confirmed that we do have adequate capacity for the build out of the Kwathiaski Cove Village Plan as it was envisioned. How many homes are in that plan? I don't have that number off the top of my head, but we could look into that for you.
Okay, thank you. In the report, it mentions that one of the recommendations was to review and enforce mandatory connection requirements associated with the 2019 extension. I'm curious if that has been completed.
I believe that it has. There are some, I believe that it has, yes.
Okay, thank you. And in the financial plan page included in the report, it mentions that the service is currently funded by user fees. However, the service bylaw also provides for the provision of parcel taxes or property value taxation. I'm wondering if there's a number that that staff know about how many properties within the sewer service area are not connected to the service, and is it possible to consider a parcel tax on these lots so that they could contribute to the building of the reserve?
So I'll give you part A answer, and maybe Sheena can give you part B. So the intent of, it doesn't matter, regional district, any local government, parcel tax, I'll say parcel tax and user fees, just because simple term, is that let's say it's a way to collect revenue to operate a system. So let's say you have a developer that creates a 100-lot subdivision, and he's going to give it, or she's going to give it over to the regional district. On day one of that, you'll have no users, right? So you have a parcel tax user, but you have a cost to operate that system. So local government will introduce a two-tiered system so that everyone will pay a parcel tax, so we'll collect some money because we won't collect many users. Ultimately, what you can do when the system is completely built out, you don't really need two forms, although some people prefer it because they'll defer their taxes. And I'm not certain you can defer user fees, but you might be able to defer a parcel tax. So we sometimes keep that. But from our perspective, if a system's built out as staff, we don't care if it's a parcel tax or user fee. It's just a net amount of money for us. But it's a way to transition till that system is built out. So I believe we're likely mostly built out, but you have a number of capacity issues, or let's say it's an area that we have capacity wants to be brought into the service area. They may or may not have a lot of users, but you want to collect revenue, so you remain that parcel tax. You can continue to collect revenue and contribute to a reserve fund.
Yeah, if I may add to that, thank you through the chair. The Kwathiasi Cove sewer service area is significantly larger than where collection infrastructure exists. So we could add more users to the system if we expanded the collection infrastructure, as we did in 2017. So the system has adequate capacity if we were to build out that entire service area, but it would be a significant capital project to do so.
So it sounds like we can't just add a parcel tax to the properties that are not currently using the
Well,
system.
if you're
Just trying to find some more money for this.
yeah, you know you can. If you're in the service area, then we can charge properties a parcel tax because they have the ability. Where you're outside the service area, you have limited ability to connect. So that when we create a service area, and if we have a parcel tax, yes, we collect some money from those folks, and then we collect an additional amount of money from folks that are users. So you can be in a system for 20 years not connected, but you've paid a parcel tax, but you always have that ability to connect to it, which has value.
So but there's currently no parcel tax.
Correct, we do not apply parcel tax. There was parcel tax, if the CFO could correct me if I'm wrong, on the extension that was done?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was when we applied that.
Right, and we'd had many discussions in previous years about that, but that ability to introduce one does exist.
Right, okay, well, just save that for later.
So for example, for Area D water, we have what I'll classify as a parcel tax. We have a requisition limit. People pay that. And then we have obviously a user fee on bottom. Practically, I mean, if we wanted, it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. You could drop the parcel tax in Area D water and just increase the user fee of that amount of revenue. Like we pull it into one pot.
Rice?
Just a comment on that. With regards to an actual parcel tax, I've been going through this because in Area D, we have all of the households on the southern water system that do pay the parcel tax. One way to look at the parcel tax in terms of fairness is that when it's applied, it may not benefit that homeowner at that moment because they've made the decision that they don't wish to be connected to the water. But you also have to take a look at down the road to the next owner. They may choose to be connected, for example, to water. So basically, having that parcel tax already in place is maintaining that system past their properties with the future intent that perhaps more would take on the service.
Okay, well, I really appreciate all this information. I'm gonna stew upon it for a little while. I'm not gonna-
So just one last comment. Director Rice is 100% correct. Now, the theory is that like your ability to connect to that system, if you're in the service area, you shouldn't be able to not, let's say, contribute for 20 years, just sit there while everything else is operated, maintained, and at your convenience start paying. Somebody's had to maintain that. And so that is something we have brought forward in the past of introducing that, because that is quite a luxury for those not paying a parcel tax, but having the ability at any time to say, oh, now I want to connect, and they haven't contributed. I would say that's unusual.
Well, I guess that was kind of part of my original question was, is there an information on how many properties that might be, are that in the serviceable area and that are not connected?
Yeah.
Within our bylaw, it is mandatory that if you have collection infrastructure fronting your property and you do have a dwelling, you are required to connect. So everybody who has the availability to connect today, because there's infrastructure fronting their property and they have a home, are connected. So there are no occupied dwellings with collection infrastructure in front of them that are
Yes.
not paid and connected to the
So
system.
it's kind of a two-tiered though, because if you're in the service area, you have what I will characterize as an entitlement to. Now, it might not be physically in front of your home, but you have an entitlement. If you came to us and said, I want to join the sewer system, we have to maintain and reserve capacity for them. Now, they may have to pay for the sewer line to be extended, but they have an entitlement to that. And so the question is, should they be contributing to that entitlement? Because they're not, right? And
What about if they're doing an empty property?
and well, the same thing, empty properties, even maybe they have a septic or maybe they don't have a house or anything, but you know, you have that entitlement to it where we're maintaining the rest of it. And then you go, okay, now I'm going to build a house on that. And at that point, you start contributing. So as Sheena said, right now, you have to connect if it's in front of you. But we have almost all, almost all of those connected. It's those that don't have it in front but have that entitlement are not contributing. But they certainly have, that adds value to their property, and we must maintain the system for them to call at any time because they're in the service area. Where if you're out of the service area, we don't own or we're not obliged to provide anything for you.
I really appreciate that conversation. Thank you very much. I have one more thing that I wanted to ask. You know, it's talking about, this report talks about Class D estimates, and it's looking to me like $3.5 million and a potential of a senior government grant of 70 or 73%, which leaves $1 million cost to 216 local users with a capital reserve of less than $100,000, thankfully up from $25,000 in 2022. So it just seems like these numbers are really challenging, and they really highlight the issue of service infrastructure for small rural communities, and that we need more than a rate increase, we need a miracle. And I was curious if staff have any thoughts on creative solutions to the challenge. Are there any other ideas from other rural areas which we could potentially employ? Because we're talking about a potential increase, but it feels like that's so insignificant in a way.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. You say miracle, I say a partner. I think through my experience and QCove is not the only one that's been in this, others have, and they've replaced that miracle with a partner. So you've basically looked at a development partner, and so just as the theoretical, it's nothing to do with QCove, it's every, local government service area out there, is that, let's say you need a $5 million upgrade and you feel you're able to get 70, 80% of it, that leaves X amount of dollars. You find a partner that will create that delta, because you're right, putting that on the QCove residents, we have 200 and change residents, and that would mean 1 million and change. I mean, you're right, the number's astronomical. How do we get there? The only solution I've ever seen that's worked is a partner.
May Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. The current motion, which the board supported, was for a 2.5% increase. And the report is kind of highlighting that maybe it would be beneficial to increase that. And I'm just curious if it would have to go back to the board again if we recommend changing the increase to, say, 3.5%. And would that make it challenging to get the bills and information sent out in a timely fashion?
I don't think you need a board resolution. Of course, this is direction from, I would say, the EA one-on-one meetings where we presented the challenge that you're clearly aware of. There's a whole lot of money that we need to collect, and this was a way to inch our way forward to close that gap. As you've noticed, yes, we've increased that reserve fund from 25,000 to 100,000, which is significant. But this is a question for our CFO. If we change that percentage simply from 2.5 to something else, does that have any effect on you? No. Okay, so there you go. If you want to change that number from 2.5 to something else, I don't see an issue with that in terms of certainly sending out the bills.
Okey-dokey, call a question on receipt. All those in favor? That is carried. Motion, please, Director Mooney.
Okay, well, there's a recommended motion here.
Read it out.
Read it out, okay. That the committee recommend that a bylaw be prepared to amend the rates for the Kwathiaski Cove sewer system to generate the revenue requirements identified in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan.
So just before that's moved, if that gets moved and seconded and passed, then it will be the 2.5%. Because the financial plan identifies that. So if it is your intent to change that, I would say change the motion now.
Okay, so do you have a recommendation? Do I just have to?
Well, you're acutely aware as much as we are the delta that's here. So, yes, so.
Well, I would be, I think that I would be comfortable making a motion that we increase the, to 3.5% rather than 2.5%. I'm just not exactly sure on the language that I need to say that for.
I think if you include in the motion.
Just to say 3.5.
3.5%, we're aware of what your intent is.
Okay, so I will remove the motion, Chair, that the committee recommend that a bylaw be prepared to amend the rates to 3.5% increase for the Kwathiaski Cove sewer system to generate the revenue requirements identified in the 2024 to 2028 financial plan.
Second.
Question, anyone? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Proposed grant and aid service number 6 for receipt.
Move receipt.
Everyone has seconded that?
So just as I kind of outlined at the board, certainly we can create a grant and aid service. That's not an issue. What we can't do is take away what the board's entitlement is right now, but that's not a problem. You can create one that I would say somewhat duplicates that. It just doesn't remove their ability. It doesn't have to be all the partners involved. Whoever wants to participate can participate in the service, and we certainly can create that. We would have to, it would likely go around a few meetings. We discuss the parameters, what we want to do, how we want to do it, what we want to give out money for, but certainly the ability to create a grant and aid service for the EAs and how many is clearly available.
I'll just make a comment on this. The electoral areas don't want a grant and aid service because the problem is always in the funding. If it's based on assessments, it's just not gonna work. So what we had hoped for was similar to what the Comox Valley did with just a simple delegation of authority. There must be some way that they think that's legal that we stumble over.
And because, I'm just gonna argue, because they think it's legal, I'm gonna argue it's not legal. And my argument for that is because you, through the establishment of the service, you as a director, all the directors on the board have been given that. So you get elected and you show up and that's something you've been gifted. You can't fetter somebody's ability by changing what they're entitled to take it away. My opinion is, if they have done that, delegated that authority, a director on the board can say, well, you can't take that away from me. I've been given that entitlement to vote on it. You don't have the ability to delegate that away from me.
I understand.
So I don't believe we can do that. So,
How did they do it? Or did they just,
well, I mean, they can do whatever they want unless somebody's challenged them on it, right? But I think it's our duty to bring you what we believe is within the authority and legal to do that.
I can comment on how they did that. It's basically, it went back and forth. There's only 2 participants in that particular service where the authority was delegated, and it was only on housekeeping items. That's all it was.
oh, okay. Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, as far as the Comox Valley Regional District, when they do this delegation of authority, would the inspector of municipalities have had to approve that?
No, it doesn't sound like it was a bylaw. So, I mean, we can make whatever rules we want here, but again, it's our job to bring forward recommendations and give you advice on authority that we believe to be consistent. But again, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but go back to the principle. You showing up on the board, you have been, gifted or entitled a number of legislative authorities. And the person that comes after you is going to be gifted those same things. You don't have the ability to remove that from them. They have been established in there. And so one of those is within the service, the ability to vote on things. Now you can create a tighter service that identifies, certain aspects that the committee may want to create that in a way somewhat may duplicate that, but you can't remove somebody's legislative authority. That's fettering their ability to govern on issues, and there's absolutely no way you can delegate that. We can create policy here. We can do whatever we want. That stuff doesn't go to the province for approval, but that also doesn't mean it's legal.
Okay. So
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense.
If I go follow up, Chair, has there been any conversations with the Comox Valley Regional District?
Yes, certainly, there has been.
And again, no disrespect, but regardless of what they do, whether they think it is, I mean, Director Rice has identified that's housekeeping, which I think is encouraging. I just disagree with that. You cannot delegate that authority away from somebody that's been given that legislative authority. You can't remove your ability to govern and vote on things that you've been gifted. You just cannot take that away.
Well, just to expand on that, the only way to do that would be to adopt a service bylaw. That's the only way that I'm aware of where the board could allow a subset of the board directors to make decisions and pay for the decisions that they make.
Go ahead, Director Rice.
One more comment that I would like to make on that is that even though it sounds like things were delegated, we have to be careful using that word. What it is that one committee has agreed that let's just simply refer this, because it's a housekeeping item, back to the electoral directors. That's where the actual vote gets taken. And because it is in this case, it's a 2-participant service, I get invited to that board meeting, so I still vote on that. So I haven't lost anything.
Okay, so I have one further comment, if I might. the only hangup with creating electoral area service is the financing of it. Is there no possible way that we could continue to each contribute the portion that we want to that service instead of doing it on assessments?
Yeah, we can create a different, that would be the trickiest thing, right? Because if we continue, like your fire service, right? You're 60/40 on that. So there is other ways to do that. And likely if we created this service, we would have to get creative with that, because you would contribute via assessments, but we all know they're not exactly the same. And then how would you withdraw based on that?
Because we did this several years ago and we came to the same roadblock. So if you could come up with a system whereby at budget time, we would, each electoral area contribute whatever we wanted annually, we could probably have something that might work.
So we've done something similar because, you know, I think the Canadian government, we stopped making the penny because it cost us 2 pennies. So similar with that pot of money we have for, geez, what's it called, that all the EAs contribute to it?
EA administration.
Is it the constituency expense, Mike? Yeah, so the constituency, where I think there's a $25,000 pot of money that you contribute via assessment, which we all know is an unequal, but we created like an internal policy, if you will, of how to extract that. So we said, okay, everybody, we contribute this by assessment, which is unequal. You can each withdraw, let's say $5,000, and if you're going to go beyond that limit, it comes back to the EASC, and somebody says, hey, I've spent my $5,000, do you mind if I use an extra 1,000? That to us has been a simpler solution than to trying to, again, come up with an amount of money. I mean, I suppose we could come up with an amount of money that you contribute, and then there would be an equal amount of money that you could withdraw. That has seemed to work okay in that we have these limits and then you go beyond that. It's just seemed to me simpler to continue on that. So if there was desire for a grant and aid service, maybe we'd do something that we could create an internal policy that would simplify that because of the unequal contributions and
Right, well,
withdrawals.
if one of the directors wants to make a motion that we could bring back something, have a look at it, it might work.
Still on receipt.
After receipt,
Second
yeah,
read.
yeah,
Still on receipt.
May I ask a question, Chair?
Still on receipt.
yeah, yeah.
I have a
ahead.
question. Thank you. With the planning service that we all share, we discuss things here in detail and then make a recommendation to the board, and then planning service items are on a board agenda. So my question is, with a shared grant and aid service, would that still be the case? Items going to the board and being voted on by a subset of the board? Or could the decisions be made at this committee?
Every decision has to be
At the board.
board, yeah.
Okay, so
But it
interesting.
wouldn't matter if we're the only ones that
Right,
vote on it.
right. So
Right.
for example, I'll give you one, is EA remuneration. It's only a vote of the 4 EAs. Then that still goes to the board, but you're still the only 4 that vote on that, so.
Okay, anything further on receipt? Call the question then on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Do we have a motion or not? I don't have a motion. Well, we can bring it at the next meeting if someone wants to think about it. All right.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to defer this item to the next EASC and give us time to think about the best way to move forward.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? That's carried. All righty. We're down to number 7, Bill 46, Housing Statutes. For receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Second.
And Meredith will speak to this.
I think that was.
Thank you through the chair. So as you've seen, a number of different bills and housing statutes that the province has passed this year that have implications for us here at the SRD. Bill 44 is one of those. It changed the development financing tools available to planning. So the first one is that it expanded the areas where we could apply development cost charges. They previously could only be used for infrastructure related to sewer, water, drainage, highway facilities, and the acquisition of parkland. Now that's been expanded so that we can include fire protection, police services, solid waste, and recycling facilities. Of course, they can only apply to areas that are already have those services in place. So there's a few areas that have services. The second one is amenity cost charges, which are somewhat similar, but they apply to different things. We can use ACCs now. We didn't have this as a tool before. Now we can use that to provide for the capital costs related to social, cultural, heritage, recreational, or environmental benefits. So that could provide for amenities like community centers, libraries, and childcare facilities. Of course, this is a new tool, so we don't currently have any ACC charges in place. If there was an interest on the EAs to add these tools to our repertoire, we could. Both would have to be through a bylaw, separate bylaws for DCCs and ACCs. It's important to note that they only apply at the time of subdivision and the issuance of building permits. So if you don't have a building permit service, it would be hard for us to levy these charges on them. So the ask today is to see if there is interest from the EAs to explore these further and then bring back some options for consideration. Thank you.
Director Vanash?
Thank you, Chair. I think like the original intent of this motion was more around amenity contribution policy. So on Cortez Island, somebody wants to subdivide their property, that we would potentially have a policy that says, if you want to do that, here are some things to follow. Like, you know, maybe contributing to housing in some way, or having some of the property go to parks, etc. Because we don't have a building service, Cortez, we don't have police, we don't have community centers owned by the district. So I don't have an interest in moving forward with the Homes for People plan here. I'm just wondering from staff the difference between amenity cost charges and amenity contributions. So my understanding, there's a difference there. Is that correct?
Thank you through the chair. The only real difference there is that amenity cost charges may be required. We cannot require a contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. And is it possible to have an amenity contribution policy that would say, look, these are things that we're looking for, or things to consider when people are asking for subdivision that we aren't charging them for, but we are sort of providing a vision as we make assessments?
Through the chair, that is currently how we manage amenity contributions. It is through your official community plan as objectives for the community. Again, we cannot require them, but we can recommend that an application that is seeking an OCP or a rezoning amendment, that those applications would probably be more likely to be supported by the community if they offer that amenity. But again, it would totally be at the discretion of the applicant, and it's not something that we could impose as a condition. Through the amenity cost charges tool, if we were to establish a bylaw to do that, then we could impose that as a requirement of that development.
So I think, if I might just chip in here, that a policy is basically a suggestion where a bylaw is a requirement.
Yeah.
And if I may chime in, Mr. Chair, so just think of the intent in this in terms of development is that you have a development come in, it provides housing, that's great. The developer comes in and presumably they're going to make some money on the development, and the impact of that development has on the community, right? They're using more recreation, roads, library, everything else, parks. So it's a policy to create a way for us to collect some funds on the front end to enhance or enlarge the resources that new development is creating on the community. So if we have an amenity, a DCC or an amenity contribution policy, it's another tool for when development comes forward on guidelines of what we have consulted with the director of the community on what they would like to see. Because without that, you keep adding to the community. Those additions put more weight on the resources that are there, and there's no funds to pay for that.
Dr. Rice?
Thank you, Chair. I know that, at least for Area D, I'm interested in getting a further report. I'm interested in both of these items. Thank you.
Director Mooney?
Okay, well, I also see Director Vanesh has his hand up again. But I did have something that I wanted to say, and I want to say thank you for the report. And one of the two motions which sparked the report, at the beginning, it says that the staff prepare a report for the Electoral Area Services Committee providing information, background, and options on amenity contribution policies for regional districts. And it sounds like neither of these development cost charges or amenity contribution amenity cost charge potential bylaws would be beneficial to Area C, as we don't have a building service. So when I proposed the motion, as seen in the report at the beginning, it was because I understood that having a policy would bring clarity for staff and for potential land developers. And what I was hoping for was information on what types of amenity contribution policies other islands and electoral areas have, so that there could be sort of like a baseline to understand from. And perhaps I realize now that it may have not been entirely clear from the wording of the motion. I would still like to see that kind of information. I think it'll be valuable to the directors and to the community to learn what is happening as far as amenity contribution policies in other communities, because I think that's something that we really need to, I think if it is created with community consultation, I think it'll be really beneficial to provide clarity in the future in the community. So
I think we're still in line with that. It's kind of a stage report because a policy is called a policy because it's not a bylaw. DCCs would have to be. So I think more the report is trying to introduce what direction and where, because you don't have to go all in the same direction. Like if Director Rice wanted to have a DCC for parks or transit or transportation, he could. And you might want to have a policy more in terms of like a guiding document for when development comes. Like we are ad hoc doing it right now because we're through the OCP, but that still exists. What you're thinking of is still out there. I mean, unless somebody tells me different, you don't need a building service to create a policy in terms of what amenity contributions need to be made.
If I may, through the chair. Certainly, it was not completely clear with respect to the motion that was provided in the direction that staff took. I will say, though, to provide clarity, yes, we wanted to bring this high-level report back to this committee to try to determine which EA directors may be interested in which item, because they would be applied differently, of course, to each electoral area. So before spending a good deal of time on each of the electoral areas for both DCCs and ACCs, we wanted to just come back to the committee and see what the appetite was of each of those directors. I think we really do need to be provided clarity before moving forward here, whether or not what you're interested in is amenity contributions or an ACC bylaw. So you already in electoral area C do have some guidelines with respect to amenity contributions, both within your OCP and your neighborhood plan, your QCO village plan. A lot of time was spent with the community back in 2010, 11, whatever year that was, to try to determine what sort of amenity contributions would be most valuable to the community when development occurred in the Cove. So there is quite a bit of guidelines provided to staff already within those documents. Again, we're going to be going out for your OCP review with respect to Area C, Director Mawhinney. It would be at that time that we would explore again with the community where they saw the need and what amenities would be of most value, and that would be included in your OCP. We look to your OCP and your neighborhood plans to provide guidelines when we do see applications before us for developments where an OCP and rezoning application is required. So certainly we can explore these further for each EAs. I just do really ask for maybe some more specific direction prior to bringing back reports, and perhaps we'll bring back separate reports for each EA depending on what the will is of each of the directors. Thanks.
Yeah, and so if I just quickly say that I don't want you seeding in your mind that anything that we've presented here is contingent, let's say, on a building service. So don't dismiss this because you're saying, well, I don't want a building service and all that. It's not.
Yeah, just be sure it's got nothing to do with electoral area A. Director Ganesh.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to say that, I support Director Rice's, intent to be able to bring in a DCC or ACC for electoral area D. I think that's great. It's a good fit for him. And I think just to provide direction to staff, I would love to see a specific section added to ROCP that is a policy guideline for development around amenity contribution policies, and just having that really clear. And I think it's going to be pretty basic. That just provides some intent and vision and allows developers to look at this and be like, oh, okay, these are the things I can consider. And just thinking back to some of the developments we saw, last week there was a development that said they were going to donate $100,000 to the Housing Society. And that's, I think that was kind of an ad hoc thing. They just, decided that was a number that they would choose. And I think it would be really useful, certainly for Area B, and I think similar to Area C, that we have, a policy that guides and provides vision both for us as we make a decision and for developers as they consider making developments.
Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear to staff, what I am interested in is an actual bylaw. So I think that this is something that would be quite important for Area D.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can, just listening to discussion, I think what we can do, I don't think we need a motion direction right now, is I think take this back and provide a little more clarity and options and what is connected maybe to some of those options to bring a little, again, more clarity to what you may want to entertain. So I don't believe there's a motion here. I'm happy at the end of the day to take this back and extract what we have from this conversation and then bring another report, expanding on this a little bit and then inching our way forward to whatever we want.
Maybe you could make it specific for each of the electoral areas that are interested.
Yeah, to try and, unwind this a little bit more and possibly individually. And again, I think, we might have introduced some confusion in terms of, what we need to be connected to. I know when we start talking about building services and that it's not one stop fits all. Like it depends on, what we're introducing, or whether it's a policy, a bylaw, or how we're collecting, whether it's mandatory, whether it's suggestion, advice, whatever.
Okay, we're still on receipt? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I think that having a report about something like this from staff and providing, options and what regional districts can do as far as information and background and options would be really helpful to the community as well. If there was information about what it could look like, or what other jurisdictions are, what are rural electoral areas and island communities choosing as those policies or guidelines for, I think that then it almost is a way of sparking the conversation, which sounds like Onoco is going to be part of the official community plan conversation. But, sometimes when there's more information available, it makes people's it provides a range of options and information, so it can provide education and support that conversation, rather than expecting people to just kind of come up with the ideas out of thin air.
Thank you, through the chair. Certainly, that would be something that we would bring forward in a further report. Just wanting to have some guidance from each EA so that we can focus our attention mostly where those EAs would like to potentially move forward. I do want to clarify, you don't need a building service, but you can only collect DCCs and ACCs where there's a building permit issued or where there's a subdivision. So you either need to be issuing a building permit or a subdivision is being approved. But we definitely can bring back some further information, and I will bring back reports separately. I think that's probably the most effective way.
Okay, Director Winnie has one more.
Thank you. And I'm really interested to see, I'm happy that Director Rice is going to be able to explore this. I think that it'll provide learning for myself and my electoral area as well, if it isn't a good fit for us right now. But it's still great learning. And I think I look forward to seeing the report. Do you need more clarity still? You were saying you needed more clarity.
No, I think we'll gather ourselves and review the conversation and kind of extract what we've got here and bring next level to you. Because we just need to bring more clarity and more options and availability, because at the end of the day, this isn't a bad thing. It's nothing you're going to get pushback from the community. It's a way for us to look at the impacts that development is having and how can we find ways to help support funding the resources that development is putting on the existing community. So I don't want you thinking this is something that the existing community is going to think is a negative upon them. It's a way to help support, bring resources to things that are having growth contribute to, financially.
And one final question, you were talking about how when it's a bylaw of like an ACC bylaw, that it's only applicable at a time of subdivision or a building permit. Well, I guess what I'm wondering is if that would potentially be able to work with a siting permit, or if it's a policy, maybe it doesn't have to have those strict guidelines. It would be more at rezoning, or is that correct?
Thank you, through the chair. Again, if we're speaking about amenity contributions as more of high-level policy as contained within your OCPs, that just provides some guidance to staff at the time of rezoning to advise the applicants what might make their application more amenable to the community. If you're talking about amenity or development cost charges or ACCs, that is a bylaw that can only apply at subdivision or building permit. But certainly if we're looking at more policy-related items in your OCP, we can suggest those types of amenities at any time in hopes of the community receiving those amenities as part of the density that's afforded through the rezoning process.
Thank you very much.
All right, question on receipt. Oh, Director Vinesh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'll make a motion after receipt.
All right, on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair, and open to feedback from fellow directors here, but I'd like to move that staff come back with a report on ACC and DCC bylaw for electoral area D and amenity contribution policies for electoral areas B and C. And I'm leaving you out there, Gerald, on purpose, but I'll let you include yourself if you want to.
Area is out of this.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Is that clear, Tom, with that motion?
Well, I think it aligns with the conversation, and certainly, yes, from my perspective.
I don't have a second.
Second.
Here we go. All right, all those in favor?
Oh, can I ask a
Oh,
question?
you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to, the motion, can you say it again? Because I was just wondering if you're coming back with the report on amenity contribution policies, if that is going to also include, any information on what other jurisdictions are choosing? Because I think that's really important to see.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, there's lots of them out there. I mean, if you want a way to collect funds, and I'm talking about mostly land development projects, if you want a way to collect some money for, current existing resources that are out there that these are putting on, then this is what you want to look at. It's a way to get some money for something that's being used as a result of new development. That's what makes it's what makes development sometimes attractive in regional districts, is that if you don't have these DCCs or contributions, then they go put a development in your community and you get basically nothing more out of it. Like you in any municipality, I don't know if there's any that would not have a DCC, but you're gonna have to pay DCCs for numerous things: parks, roads, sewer, water, transit, everything. So it's a way that as development comes, we know there's growth in all these areas, and if there's nothing that we have, you're going to get the development, and if it's going to bring housing that maybe you want, but you're not going to get anything else, right? So we're looking at ways to, look further down the horizon at ways to financially support. For example, if we had a sewer DCC in Area C, that would contribute to a pot of money to help us assist with that.
And would that only be applicable if it was a development that was happening within the service area?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, you couldn't charge DCC for something, but it's a way to, again, to collect money for the resources that these developments are using and not really making a contribution to them.
Great. I'm excited to read this report.
All right, calling the question on Director Vanessa's motion. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving right along. Ministerial meetings at UBCM Convention number 8. For receipt.
Move receipt.
Have a seconder?
Second.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can, I know I keep harping on this, but just want to raise attention to that, and if there are subject items, topics that you want, because again, we need to submit and populate and have some narratives and some speaking notes, that we just want to bring it to your attention to lend your mind to it and contribute those subjects and meetings that you would like to do, so we can start organizing it. It's close to mid-July, and mid-September isn't far away, so just want to keep it on your radar.
Is this the place to talk about our pathology lab, or is that another organization?
Yeah, no, sure.
That should be on the list because that's just going downhill fast. Director Mooney?
At the last UBCM, Dr. Rice and I shared a meeting with Ministry of Transportation. But we didn't really know we were going to be sharing the meeting until very shortly beforehand. So I personally think that meeting with Ministry of Transportation staff is critical. And I'm curious what the other directors feel, but I think that going and talking to Ministry of Transportation staff and explaining that we would actually like to have ongoing conversations, maybe one thing we can do is invite them to talk to us, twice a year or quarterly or something, and share information with us. I just feel like there needs to be more lines of communication between Ministry of Transportation and electoral area directors, who I'm sure that other directors receive just as many questions and concerns about all sorts of stop sign and pothole and why can't we put an arrow here questions as anybody else. Director Rice, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't think we have to use a meeting for the minister for that. I had invited Kellen Truant and his counterpart to come and present to the board. Unfortunately, I think they weren't able to meet the commitments for the dates. So I think what we can do is just make that a thing that we would like to do in January, reach out to Kellen Truant. He's more than happy to come in and present to the electoral directors what are their capital projects that are going forward for this year, just like they did over at Comox. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that all organized in time. Thank you.
So are you thinking, sorry, is you're thinking that that's a separate issue, like maybe that we can have staff invite them to the meeting? But I still think that I personally know that I want to meet with Ministry of Transportation staff when there's lots of things that I'd like to discuss with them.
So from my perspective, at UBCM, they only put, real limitations or significant limitations on municipal affairs in the premier. I think the batting average is very high with all the other ministers. They're instructed to meet and talk. So, if you want to talk to them about anything, I don't think there's any kind of real wasted opportunities if, they're there. And I think you're going to get an excellent chance to meet with either the minister, and if not, they'll direct it down to staff. So, you're all there. Fill out your dance card and come up with some subject matter. So, the worst they can say is no, right? But I think the tier below the premier and municipal affairs, it gets pretty good success.
Anything further?
Well, maybe just again, if anyone, we can discuss it here, but if you have thoughts at, 11 p.m. an idea, email it. We're happy to, just populate that. Just again, lend your mind to it. Need some time. We need to prep. We need to do speaking notes. We need to gather information. So, so the earlier, the more you get it to us, the better we all are for it.
Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. I would support Director Mahaney's request for Ministry of Transportation. That'd be really useful for my community as well. And I'd also like to make a request for Minister of Housing. One of the big issues that we're facing is that most of the housing money has gone to municipalities and urban centers, and that there's a real deficit in rural areas. So I think there's value in us sitting down with the housing minister too. So those are my two requests. Thank you.
I'll second that one.
All right, seeing nothing else, call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That's passed. Number 9, Transport Canada Vested Wars Funding Extension for receipt.
Move receipt.
Director Vinesh, thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried.
I'll move the recommendation that the committee recommend that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute the amendment agreement with Transport Canada.
Second.
Second by Director Vinesh. Discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, number 10, Surge Narrow Marine Revitalization Project for receipt.
I'll move receipt of the report.
Second.
I think Annika will speak to this.
Thank you, through the chair, to the committee. The report before you is to seek support from the committee and receive a board motion to apply for an amendment to our existing license at Surge Narrows to accommodate the Surge Narrows Marine Revitalization project and works that we're hoping to move forward with early probably later this year, early next year. Given the tenure area is limited and the new facility is outside of the existing tenure, the province has indicated that we need to amend our license. So in order to get our application in, we are seeking a recommendation from the board. Thank you.
Anything on receipt? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Motion?
I will move that the committee recommend that the regional district submit an application for Crown Land tenure over District Lot 312 Sabre District and surrounding area to accommodate the Surge Narrows Marine Revitalization Project infrastructure.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion?
I do have a question for staff. I'm just
Go
curious
ahead, Director Mahoney.
Thank you, Chair. If it's anticipated that this 10-year expansion application may impact the timing of the project.
Thank you, through the chair. We're hoping that it will not. I think we're somewhat satisfied that we would likely be able to move forward with the project without having the updated license in hand. That's our hopes, just because the timing has not always been as quick as what we would like to see. So we're fairly confident that this won't affect our timing for construction.
Thank you.
Okay, call question on the motion. All those in favor? Carried. Back to number 4, agriculture regulation by local government for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion.
I do have a question.
Director Winnie.
Thank you. At the board, when we were discussing this, it was mentioned that there was a request in with the province to receive a copy of the Evans Bay license and see if there were any conditions that had been issued on it. And I'm curious if that has been received yet?
Thank you through the chair. We have received a copy of the license. We have yet to receive information from the province as to whether or not any conditions associated with that would be something that we could attach to a public agenda. So we have not done that to date because we're still waiting to hear how much of that license can be shared.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do have another question as well. I'm wondering if the SRD has a mechanism for investigation if there are concerns with the surface of the water use infractions. What has happened historically?
Thank you through the chair. We typically try to do as much as we can from the upland, given we have limited resources to actually get over the surface of the water. In the past, we have taken water taxis to specific sites where there's been enforcement.
I'll just add a little personal anecdote to that. One day when, this was years ago when I started, and Island Sea Farms issues and complaints we were getting them significantly, and I was having a challenge relating to the issues, and they were about the surface, the activity that's happening on the surface for that aquaculture. So I said, okay, look, I'm just going to go out there one day because I hear all these complaints about noise. It was specifically about the noise and what they're doing and how it's generated. So I picked a day to go out because they only, as I understood, did the activity on certain days. So I picked a day, went out. It happened to be raining cats and dogs that day, but I committed. I went out to Cortez. I went to the marina and stood on the wharf, and it's pouring rain, and they were doing their business, and I couldn't hear anything, right? Mainly because it was pouring rain. There's all kinds of activity. There's wind. There's everything. And so my point about that is referring to what Aniko says is you've got an in-time complaint about, look, it's 10 o'clock and they're doing this activity and super noisy and they got to keep it between a certain decibel level. SRD doesn't own a boat. Cortez is a couple islands away. You go out, they're not doing the activity. Maybe things are going on. Maybe it's raining. Maybe it's very challenging. My point is to how we investigate and enforce items that are activities that are happening periodically and refer to, the noise mainly that goes on in reference to Island Sea Farms. It's a difficult one. And I just, remember that day, and it's like, how could we do anything about this depending on what's going on that day with Mother Nature and that? I can tell you personally, I couldn't hear anything, but again, it was raining so hard that day. It's challenging, yeah.
Thank you for that. That's interesting. And I mean, technology has changed right now, right? We have a lot more people can video things and stuff like that. I'm wondering if it sounds reasonable to defer this receipt of this or defer this again until maybe next month so we could potentially have more receipt about the license? Or would you bring that independently if I don't defer it? How would that work?
Thank you through the chair. The issue with the conditions of the license is the regional district does not have authority with respect to the conditions that are contained within the license. That those conditions are either enforced by the federal government or the provincial government, depending on what type of license is issued. So the regional district would not have any authority to ensure that any of those conditions are in place or whether that operation is compliant. And I would guess that though that license would likely not come to the committee in the fully as it currently is. So yeah, I don't know how to answer your question other than it's unlikely that we will provide the entirety of the license on a public agenda and share those conditions with the public.
Why is that? Is it prohibited or?
Well, we're
Or is
waiting to hear final word on that, but yeah, those licenses typically, like we don't even have access to those through our system online. We had to specifically request that, and that request had to get approved by someone higher up at the province. So that's why we're assuming that likely that license would not be provided to the public.
If we were successful then, but we possibly have an in-camera discussion if we had access to it.
I would recommend that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I understood that when the SRD responded in May 2022, that it says in this report, that it was recommended that they would require a rezoning, and was that not to do with also the increase in space that it was intending to take up versus the current space? So like I am interested in pursuing this. I think it's important to understand what is happening at the province because, you know, as the director that's representing this area, I think that maybe I'm going to need to go and talk to my MLA. But first, I think we all need as much information as possible. So do I need to defer it or will
No,
you
I don't
bring that
think you need to
information
defer it.
anyway?
We'll bring that regardless. Again, like it sounds like we're not 100% positive whether we're gonna get it. We can certainly request it, and then if we do, we can bring it in camera and provide you with the details of what we know, and then hopefully that will reveal, you know, conversations that you may or may have with the MLA or constituents. I anticipate their answers likely folks aren't going to want to hear. As Aniko said, it's, you know, we're not the license, we don't issue the license and we're not the authority. So, you know, we're the conduit maybe to providing that information to you, maybe some of it to the community, but these are likely answers that people aren't going to want to hear and or that we don't have authority. But it's all part of the knowledge gathering in terms of it. Yeah.
Okay, well, to be continued. Thank you.
All right, call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, we're down to bylaws. Number 1, bylaw 509, Cortez Island bulk water regulations for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second?
Second.
Oh, I can't do that.
I can. Second.
Go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Wood. Discussion? Seeing none on receipt. All those in favor? Oh, Dr. Vanesh, you have something to say there?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out my understanding is in a previous EASC that we made some changes here that aren't included, so I do have a subsequent motion. After receipt.
Nothing further?
After receipt, he said. He said after receipt.
After receipt. All right. On receipt then. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, Director Vanesh?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I haven't searched the minutes, but I was pretty sure in a previous EASC that we already passed the removal under prohibited uses, number 1 and 2. You know, I made the argument that I don't want to, you know, criminalize the most marginalized people on Cortez while we're in a housing crisis. So I wanted section 303C 1 and 2 removed. So I'd like to see the use of an accessory building or structure for human habitation and the use of vessels as liverboards or houseboats removed from the prohibited uses. I guess I could make that in a formal motion, unless staff has comments.
So we need a seconder if that's a motion.
I don't know if I made an actual motion there.
Oh, he didn't make a
I was just
motion.
gonna say,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Sounds like-
Thank you through the chair.
We need something on the floor here. Oh, well, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you through the chair to the director. Just to provide a little bit of clarity here, what the, you know, C1 is indicating is that an accessory building is not a dwelling unit. It doesn't contain the necessary amenities to be used as habitable space. It would not contain, a kitchen, likely a washroom. So that's why that has been in here for quite some time, because even in a housing crisis, we don't want people to have to resort to potentially having to live in those sorts of conditions, because this is what people are offering to those people that are having difficulty accessing appropriate housing. These these are not up to standard. They're certainly not up to code, and they don't have the life safety components that are necessary for people to live in. So, I mean, that is justifiably why that sort of language is contained in this bylaw. Providing a shack to somebody that doesn't have any amenities in it is definitely not a solution to the housing crisis. And with respect to vessels or liveaboards, again, they're not built for residential use, and that's why they're not permitted. And they would still not be permitted even if they're not in the bylaw. So this does provide clarity that those types of uses are not permitted for residential use, but certainly at the will of the board, if they would like to remove that, that would be brought forward to the board following the recommendation of the committee today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think, the reality of the situation is, we don't want people living in housing that's inadequate. We don't want people living in homes that are, don't have basic amenities. Reality of the situation is a lot of people are. And my concern is that, and it's not just, I think it was sort of insinuated that it's like landlords offering these substandard housing. And the reality of the situation, it's people building their own shack or living in a trailer or having their own boat. So it's not really landlords providing it, it's people providing their own housing. So I would like to make a motion that we remove section C1 and 2 from the part 303 prohibited uses from this bylaw. I can have a seconder.
I can second that.
Mr. Winnie seconded it. Any further discussion? Just might mention, Director Vanessa, in the future, make your motion first and then we can debate it. So at least we have
Thank you,
something on the
Chair.
floor. All right, on the question then. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question as well, because I thought that there had been a previous motion to remove the section about the use of vessels as liveaboards. I thought that had already been done previously, but maybe I'm misremembering.
Thank you. Through the chair, there was definitely discussion and perhaps recommendation from the committee, but that recommendation never made it to the board. So we didn't have direction from the board to remove that in this iteration.
I believe the motion at the time was that it be removed, the use of vessels as liveaboards, and brought back to the Electoral Area Services Committee for review, and that, but it hasn't been removed?
That's correct. Because it never, those motions never made it to the board to come back.
So just to clarify, every time we make a motion, like we're working on a bylaw here, so every time we want to make an amendment or a shift in that, we have to ask the board for permission to keep talking about it at EASC? Is that the way that works?
Well, there's no hard and fast rule, but I think what we're doing here is we're getting pretty deep in the weeds in terms of now we're having elected officials tell us to change what is a livable dwelling definition that is like that's quite universal across local government. Like in my mind, and it will be reflected in the report, this is not a discussion about definitions about livable dwellings that we should really be having here. So, it is quite unusual to have elected officials wordsmith like definitions within bylaws and zoning bylaws. And I think this is personally kind of pushing the limits of that. Like, this is not language that Aniko or team has come up with. This is quite universal and accepted definitions and language across local government. And I think it is quite unusual to be wordsmithing and deleting this kind of stuff. So whether it comes to the board, come back here, we have to use some discretion ourselves, and it may not follow consistent linear path at times. But I'm going to tell you this, we will have to we have an obligation when this comes to board to provide some background in terms of what is being done, because again, I think it's quite unusual to have elected officials wordsmithing definitions within zoning bylaw.
Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. And I guess for me, and I can't speak to anyone else, but, comparing where, I'm looking at the prohibitions in the different zones here within just the SRD, and they're completely different, right? Like the language that's in the prohibitions for Area B is not reflected in the prohibitions in Area C, in the Quad Island zoning bylaw. So this language that Director Vanesh is in questioning about, it doesn't appear, like there's no language to talk about vessels as liveaboards or houseboats in the Quadra Island version. It's just on the Cortez version.
Thank you, through the chair. Perhaps an explanation is because this is the way the zoning bylaw has been written since the time that it was adopted. And so each zoning bylaw, depending on the timing, will be written a little bit differently. Certainly there is some references to houseboats in electoral area C. But yes, it is different than how it is currently worded in electoral area B. The problem here is that it has been recognized in electoral area B that there are certain structures that are permitted for residential use and others that are not. If somebody puts a shed on a lot that has no other dwelling, they're not obligated to have any servicing. They're not obligated to have a well. There's no checks and balances. There's no septic system. The building is most certainly, probably not built to code, not insulated. No health and safety mechanisms in place. This is why these are contained within the bylaw, and not only to protect the people, but also to protect the residences adjacent to. By people not knowing this, I mean, somebody could, throw up a shed and all of a sudden we have, a family living in a shed with no principal use, not paying appropriate taxes, because it's not being used for residential use. There's a bunch of factors in there, but certainly what we want to try to explain here is there's certain uses that are permitted on lots, provided you have appropriate structures in place, and certain uses that are not. And that's not only to protect the people that own those lots, but also to protect the neighbors.
And if I may, isn't that the reason that we have this general prohibition phrasing?
That's correct.
Director Vanesh?
Thank you. Yeah. So my understanding, question is, under prohibited uses, section A, it says any use not expressly permitted in this bylaw is prohibited in every zone, and where a particular use is expressly permitted in one zone, such use is prohibited in every zone where it is not expressly permitted. So just because we don't say something's prohibited, it's still covered under section A, right? So nothing really changes. Is that correct?
Kind of, but I think what Aniko has said, it helps reinforce that. So I think moving those sections as you do does not help reinforce that.
Thank you, through the chair. Director Vanesh, you're correct. What this does, though, is provides clarity to people that living in a shed or living in a vessel is not provincially permitted, and it's not regionally permitted, and so that just provides clarity there. Certainly, yes. If we were to get a complaint, we would enforce, or if we were to get a permit for something in a case where we needed a permit, we would only provide that if in fact it was compliant. But this again provides clarity to the public as to where those parameters are and where those limitations lie.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with having it covered under the general prohibition and not having it specifically listed. So I appreciate the support on my motion. Thank you.
All right, there's a motion on the floor. Call the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, and 3. So that's carried. Opposed? You opposed, Director Vanesh? No, it's in agreement. Okay, it's unanimous. All right, here we go. Number 2, Quad Island bulk water regulations.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, did I forget something?
I'm wondering if there's an appetite to deal with that one or no?
Item B on the first one?
Yes.
Wouldn't it have to come back, the bylaw come back, seeing as they moved to change it?
Or can I move it with the amendments?
I'm sorry, I missed what Director Benesh had to say.
Director Benish's motion, he wanted to change the wording.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand that, but I guess it's up to the committee. If the committee doesn't want to deal with, wants to table this basically and have it come back.
No,
with
I
some
think,
changes, I'm not
my
sure.
understanding, the motion passed with the amendments there to delete whatever section
Yeah,
it was.
it did.
Yeah,
So does that mean B is still in order then to,
was B,
So
I
B
guess.
is a recommendation to take this to the board for reading.
for first and
reading.
first
I
and
don't know if
second?
that's still the committee's.
I believe it was,
All right.
yeah, and
Well,
so we make the changes and bring
all right.
to the
Do we
board.
have a further motion then for Cortez Island bulk water
Sure.
regulation?
Sure. I'll move that the committee recommend that bylaw number 5110 with the
509.
509.
509, Director Benish.
I move that the committee recommend that bylaw number 509 with the approved amendments be given first, second readings, and that the public hearing for the bylaw number 509 be waived.
Do we have a director?
I'll second that.
All right, seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. All right, now we're on bylaw 510, Quadra Island bulk water regulation for receipt.
I will move receipt of the report.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of receipt? It's carried. And the motion. Just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, the motion under B should read, be given second reading. It's already had first reading, so
All right, thank you.
just a correction there.
Motion, please, Director Winnie.
I will move that the committee recommend that bylaw 510 be given second reading and that a public hearing be held at a date and time to be determined.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is carried. Correspondence for receipt. Director Rice, do you want to move receipt on this one?
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Anything on discussion, Director Rice?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This item came as a bit of a shock. And anyways, I think that with the help of Aniko, we'll have a motion on this, because there is more information that's required.
Thank you.
Can you
Anything
help me
further?
with the motion?
Yeah, I want to hear the motion from staff.
Let's just, we'll
Is
just
she
do
gonna
receipt
move it,
here
or-
I thought the
first.
director was going to try to make the motion, and then if he needed any assistance, someone could assist.
Directors
I'm
always.
happy to make the motion that,
Oh, just a moment, let's just do receipt and then you can make your motion. So on receipt then, all those in favor? And that's carried. Go ahead, Director Rice.
the motion is that staff reach out to the city of Campbell River and have them provide a report on what this potential animal control service is going to look like.
I'll second that.
If I could provide a little assistance here, Director. I think your discussion with me earlier was that staff bring back a report that includes information received from the City of Campbell River and options to provide animal control services to Area D.
Is that what you meant to say?
Sure.
I'll second that.
Did you get that, Tom? Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, call the question then. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, Director's report, new business, addendums, closed session for receipt. What? Oh, new business, yes. Thank you for speaking up. Go ahead, Director Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. Some of you may have read the recent news that Tofino has been named a Bear Smart community, joining 9 other communities and municipalities that have earned the distinction. The distinction comes from WildSafe BC, which is a provincial leader in preventing conflict with wildlife through collaboration, education, and community solutions. They offer a community program to raise awareness and educate folks on coexisting with wildlife. The electoral areas of the SRD are rich in biodiversity, including predators. And on Quadra Island, some farmers have experienced challenges with this. And recently I was asked what was I going to do about it. So while coexistence may not be within the envelope of local government, I've been wondering if applying to WildSafe BZ to provide community education be something that falls within the SRD. My reading of the program seems that there is some funding provided and that they hope for local government funding as well, and I would be really happy to consider supporting the program with Area C grant and aid funds if this was permissible. So I have a motion, if I may, that a report, okay, there we go. Receive all those words and then a motion. Okay, sorry.
Anything further by anybody?
Just a couple of comments, Chair, thank you. I know that we do have a bear problem in Area D2 with all of the development that's happening with the First Nations village. We have daily occurrences where mom and baby bears walk down the streets, and so far there has been no aggression towards people that are walking or pets, but it is becoming more and more.
I can't make any motions.
Oh, am I allowed to make a motion now? Did we vote already on receipt?
No, wait, you moved a motion to receive your report?
Oh, okay, yep.
Yeah, I got a seconder?
Second.
Mr. Rice, all those in favor? That's carried. No, you said you had a subsequent. Leave Area A out of this, please.
Yeah, bylaw 3006.
There's no greater predator than me. Area A.
That a report on the WildSafe BC Community Education Program and the potential for SRD support be brought to the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. All right, now we're down to a closed session for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Did we miss something?
No, just there was a bunch of party balloons going off in front of Director Von Esch there.
Already blue? Oh, must be like some kind of like